Early morning at Redwood Terminal International Airport. As the fluorescent lights cast a cold glow over the gleaming stone floors, two black twin sisters, Amira and Amani Carter, stepped into the security check area with business-class tickets and neatly packed backpacks. They were well-dressed, their eyes calm and steady. But it didn't take a word to know. They stood out, not because they were different, but because of the icy stares that burned into each step they took. From the moment they appeared, ground staff started whispering. Glances flickered over them like silent judgments, assessing, calculating, doubting. A blonde TSA officer named Chase Landon muttered to a coworker, "Keep an eye on those two. Look suspicious." He knew nothing about Amira and Amani, nothing but the color of their skin. He didn't know they were national taekwondo champions, trained by their father since childhood, not just to defend themselves, but to walk tall in an unjust world. But Chase wasn't the only one jumping to conclusions. As they approached the baggage screening area, a group of young white passengers, Gavin, Tucker, and Brett, stood behind them, snickering, whispering as if mocking. "Look at those backpacks, probably stolen. Better check for heat in there." Amani tightened her grip on her backpack strap. Amira closed her eyes for a moment, hearing their father's voice. "We don't bow to words, but if they put hands on you, you know what to do." They walked through the scanner. No alarms. Everything normal. But something still happened. Chase raised a hand. "Ladies, step aside for additional screening. We need to run a few more checks." "On what basis?" Amira asked, calmly. "Random check," he replied, eyes locked on their backpacks. "Completely random. Coincidence? Not at all." They knew that look too well, the one that had followed them through schools, grocery stores, and now airports. A look that didn't need a reason to doubt, just a skin tone. Inside the private screening room, Gavin and his friends walked past the glass, laughing out loud. "Wonder if they even have papers. Bet those tickets are welfare funded." No staff member intervened. No one apologized. Just silent, complicit stares. When Chase suddenly yanked Amani's backpack off her shoulder without warning, a line was crossed. And what no one in that airport realized was that the girls they had dismissed were about to ignite a reckoning the airline industry had never seen. "Why are they looking at us like that?" Sasha whispered, gripping the strap of her backpack, eyes sweeping across the line, forming at the security gate of Hamilton International, one of the most luxurious airports in America. "Because we don't look like the people they're used to seeing here," Simone replied, her voice calm, but her gaze sharp as a blade. Sasha and Simone Howard, 17-year-old twin sisters with deep brown skin and neatly braided hair, had just entered the first-class terminal. They were heading to Washington to attend the National Youth Martial Arts Conference, where they'd perform routines they'd been perfecting since elementary school, under the strict training of their father, Malcolm Howard, a retired Marine Corps officer and now owner of a renowned dojo in Oakland. Their father always reminded them, "Keep your head high and your heart steady. No one gets to define you with a glance." But that wisdom couldn't completely numb the sting of the check-in agent's cold stare, the impatient sigh of the blonde woman behind them in line, or the whisper they clearly heard. "First class? Must be lost. Look like they wandered in from baggage claim." Simone tightened her grip on her bag. Sasha glanced at the man who spoke. An older white passenger with silver hair, a glaring red tie, and standing next to a lazy-eyed blonde teen in a white hoodie. "These types rarely confront you head-on," Simone muttered. "Yeah, but they always roll in packs," Sasha added. The twins stepped up to the counter. The agent, a woman named Patricia, looked over their passports and tickets, then frowned. "Two first-class seats?" Her voice stretched the question like it didn't quite believe the words printed on the tickets. "For you girls?" Simone didn't answer immediately. She pulled out her phone and opened the confirmation email, speaking evenly. "Yes. Booked through the American Martial Arts Federation. Need me to resend the email?" Patricia glanced at the screen, scoffed, then waved them off dismissively. "Gate 4. Don't be late, and make sure security checks you thoroughly." That last sentence wasn't about protocol. It was about suspicion. The temperature in the air dropped by a degree. Sasha and Simone stepped through the airport security gate, the stares from every direction piercing the backs of their necks like needles. They weren't wearing designer brands. They weren't traveling with their parents. They didn't look like they belonged here. But still, they walked. Heads held high, footsteps steady, like stepping onto a familiar battlefield. No one in that airport knew that these two girls could take down 3 grown men in under 30 seconds. And no one knew they were about to need to do exactly that. No one spoke, but everyone stared. The atmosphere in the economy waiting area at Gate B12 seemed to freeze after one loaded comment from Logan Cranston. "Bet they wandered up from baggage handling," he said, glancing toward Sasha and Simone. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence like the calm before a storm. Outside the tall windows, the sun blazed against the tarmac, but it couldn't melt the coldness in the eyes of those watching. Sasha bent down to pick up her book, the one Logan had deliberately knocked from her hands as he passed. Simone said nothing, but her gaze was sharp as a blade, not from fear, but calculation. 3 seconds. 4. Deciding whether this moment was worth responding to. Logan, Bryce, and Ethan, the young white men in designer hoodies and AirPods, stood in a loose semicircle just feet away from the twins. They pulled their earbuds out, sensing something more entertaining than music. New targets. "Hey, heard girls like them are great at baggage handling," Bryce said loudly, just enough for others to hear. A few passengers glanced over. An old woman covered her mouth. A middle-aged man frowned, then looked away. No one intervened. Simone spoke, her voice low but sharp like a blade drawn against stone. "Watch your words. We are good at picking things up, like the pieces of arrogance left behind by people who don't know their place." The air shifted. Logan smirked. "Feisty. Don't think, just 'cause you know some kicks, you're starring in a Marvel movie," he said, stepping closer. "This isn't the place to show off, unless y'all are trying out for a clip titled 'Black Girls Freak Out in Public.'" Simone stepped forward slightly, but Sasha placed a gentle hand on her sister's arm. "Not yet," she whispered. Calm. But her eyes burned like ice melting just before the flood. Just then, a boarding call rang out for a different flight. People stirred, gathered their bags. Logan felt his window shrinking. He didn't want to wait. He wanted action. He wanted to push the girls to the breaking point. He suddenly knocked the water cup from Sasha's hand. The liquid splashed across the floor, soaking the hem of Simone's skirt. "Oops." Logan feigned surprise, covering his mouth. "Slipped." This time, no one could pretend not to see. Every eye was on them now. Sasha looked down at her wet hand, then slowly raised her head, like unsheathing an invisible sword. "Simone," she said, not even looking. But Simone knew. The signal was given. The storm was unleashed. "Now it's time," Simone said, a slight smile curling on her lips. No one saw the spin of her hips, not until Ethan flew backward into a row of chairs, groaning from the impact. Sasha turned, dodged Bryce's punch like she'd seen it coming in a past life. A swift left hook to the stomach folded him like a broken clamp. Logan froze, his legs rooted to the floor, stunned at how quickly the tide had turned. He shouted and lunged at Sasha, but she wasn't there. She was behind him, her arm locked around his, twisting and driving him to the marble floor. "You thought we came here to take abuse," Sasha said, her voice steady but thunderous. "You thought wrong." Footsteps echoed. Security officers approached. Phones were out. A mother pulled her son close and whispered, "That's what real strength looks like." One officer, breathing hard, shouted, "What is going on here?" Sasha released Logan, leaving him gasping on the floor. Simone stood beside Ethan, calmly picking up the spilled cup and placing it on a table, like closing a final chapter. "Just self-defense," she said, eyes locked on the officer. "And a free lesson for those who mistake silence for weakness." The officer looked around. Every passenger's gaze pointed in one direction, not toward the girls, but toward the groaning, bruised young men with shattered pride. Sasha adjusted her sleeve. Simone wiped the edge of her skirt with a napkin. They sat down as if nothing had happened. But nothing at Gate B12 was the same. The terminal no longer felt like an airport. It felt like a battlefield after a skirmish. Logan, Bryce, and Ethan lay curled on the floor, clutching their bruises and dignity. Phones held high. Security cameras blinking nonstop. Passengers murmuring. Some turned away, others stayed, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. 2 black uniformed airport officers stepped forward. One, Officer Sanders, held a radio, eyes scanning the scene. "Who threw the first punch?" he asked. Simone answered, voice calm but razor sharp. We were being harassed repeatedly. You can check the security footage, or just ask the dozen people here. Sasha stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes unflinching. And me, she added. I won't apologize for defending myself. I'll only apologize for not teaching them that lesson sooner. Sanders hesitated. A younger officer, Davis, stepped back to the nearby control desk to radio in. Tension lingered. Just then, a tall man in a dark leather jacket appeared at the end of the hall. His footsteps carried weight, like gravity bent slightly beneath them. A passenger whispered, Is that Malcolm Howard? Retired Marine. He runs that big dojo in Texas. And TSA security advisor too, right? Malcolm approached, his gaze sweeping the scene without flinching. When his eyes found Sasha and Simone, a barely visible smile touched his lips. Not joy, pride. You girls okay? He asked, voice deep and resonant. We're good, Sasha replied. Simone pointed toward the bullies being tended to by airport medics. They didn't really get a chance to fight back. Malcolm nodded, then turned to Officer Sanders. I'm Malcolm Howard, former Marine Sergeant, currently Strategic Training Director for TSA's Southern Region. I was called regarding an altercation involving 2 young black girls being threatened and assaulted at this gate. Sanders blinked. Your federal oversight? More than that, Malcolm replied. Pulling out a badge, I rewrote the TSA's internal passenger violence intervention protocol last year. The air shifted instantly. He walked slowly toward the injured teens, gaze cold and precise. You tried to bully 2 girls, he said, without knowing whose daughters they were. Logan opened his mouth. Malcolm raised a hand. No need to answer. Not because I want to punish you, but because someday the world won't forgive this kind of behavior. He turned to the officers. Get witness statements, check all camera footage, and before anyone is taken in, I want internal affairs on site. And as for these boys, he glanced around, get them medical help first, then let the law do the rest. No one spoke. No one dared to, not even the ones who laughed earlier. Sasha and Simone were taken to a private room for water and statements. A middle-aged woman approached, hand trembling as she took Sasha's. I have a daughter, she whispered. She gets bullied too. But today, because of you, I know she's not alone. Simone smiled, gently squeezing the woman's hand like a promise. In the distance, Logan, Bryce, and Ethan sat dazed, their faces blank, as if realizing for the first time, not everyone is afraid of them. It took less than 30 minutes. A 2-minute, 17-second video posted on X, formerly Twitter, by passenger Linda Quillen went viral. Caption, they thought they could bully 2 black girls. They didn't know they were black belts and daughters of a Marine. Gate B12, Houston Airport. Within 3 hours, the video surpassed 8 million views, trending nationwide. Clips of Sasha's spinning kick, sending Bryce into a metal chair, became reaction GIFs. Simone's disarming takedown of Ethan, slowed frame by frame by martial arts YouTubers, became a moment of legend. Thousands of shares flooded social media. My mom cried. She was bullied the same way in school. Not just black girls. They're symbols of discipline, self-defense, and pride. They didn't retaliate out of rage, they responded with skill. That's the difference between warriors and thugs. By nightfall, the video hit CNN, MSNBC, and ABC News. TSA's spokesperson issued a statement under public pressure. We are actively investigating the incident at Houston International Airport, Gate B12, on April 14. All parties involved are being fully evaluated. But within 12 hours, the narrative shifted. The identities of the 2 girls were confirmed, Sasha and Simone Howard. Daughters of Sergeant Malcolm Howard, Chief Advisor of the Civilian Self-Defense in Transportation Program, a federal initiative signed into action just last year. An old photo resurfaced online. Malcolm in uniform, standing between his smiling twin daughters, holding up the black belts they earned at age 12. The image was reshared with a caption that read, "No one taught his daughters to bow to injustice. Malcolm taught them to stand tall and live without fear." The following morning, the principal of Roosevelt High School, where Logan, Bryce, and Ethan were enrolled, held an emergency press conference. We do not tolerate any form of bullying. The 3 students involved have been suspended indefinitely. On Reddit, a user claiming to be Logan's former classmate posted, Logan used to bully Asian students. Teachers did nothing. Soon, evidence of past bullying incidents surfaced. The name Logan Dryson quickly became a viral symbol of privileged white teens raised in entitlement and violence. Meanwhile, the official website of Howard Martial Arts Academy crashed due to massive traffic. Thousands of parents in Houston left comments. How do I enroll my child? I want them to learn how to stand up like Sasha and Simone. That evening, at the dinner table, no one spoke for a moment. Sasha looked at her father. Simone glanced at her sister, then smiled. We just taught the whole country how to respond to violence, Simone said softly, poking at a piece of broccoli. Malcolm took a sip of water, set his glass down. Not with fists, he replied. Sasha tilted her head. Then with what? He looked at his daughters, eyes sharp yet calm. With discipline, while the whole world waits for you to lose control. Moments later, he pulled out his phone. A message from the TSA director. We need an emergency meeting. It's time to activate your proposal for the Passenger Civil Defense Council. Sasha asked, Do you think we're in trouble? Malcolm gave a faint smile. We're not the problem. We're the wake-up call. 3 days later, U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C. Third-floor hearing room, a space once used for national security, climate change, and cyber warfare debates, now hosted a different issue, the culture of violence and inequality in American airports. The room was packed, witness seats in the center, studio lights shining down. Behind them, the American flag and the old congressional motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Malcolm Howard wore his traditional military uniform. Beside him stood his daughters, Sasha and Simone Howard, hair neatly tied up, dressed in white shirts, black vests, and formal slacks. The room fell silent as Congresswoman Eliza Brandt, chair of the Committee on Transportation and Passenger Safety, stepped up to the microphone. We've spoken enough about cameras, security, and protocols. But who speaks for dignity? Who speaks for the laughter turned to mockery and for the bullying that boards planes with us? Today, we don't just hear one family, we hear the conscience of a nation. She nodded. The entire room turned. Malcolm stood first. I fought in Fallujah. I stood guard in Kabul. But I have never trembled like I did the day my daughters called me from gate B12. Because when a father hears his child say, Dad, they're surrounding us, no medal in the world helps him sleep that night, if he does nothing. I didn't teach my daughters revenge. I taught them to master their anger. I didn't teach them to fear white people. I taught them to trust in the law and to fight if they must, with skill, not panic. He paused, eyes sweeping from the committee to the news cameras. I'm not here to ask for justice for my daughters. I'm here to ask, how many children must learn self-defense before they learn how to read? Then, Sasha stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake, but caught slightly on the first line. I'm 17. I know how to dislocate a knee in 2 seconds, but I also know how to hold back tears in a bathroom stall when classmates look at me like I'm the enemy. The room held its breath. She continued. They didn't call me girl. They called me it, a thing, a misplaced piece of luggage. But I'm not lost. I was there because I belonged, and I chose not to bow my head. Then Simone spoke. People say we're lucky to know martial arts. But don't praise me for knowing how to defend myself. Ask why I had to learn it when I was 9. She raised her head, eyes locking on the row of TSA and FAA representatives. If the system won't protect us, then the system needs to be rewritten, and I believe we can help write it. After the 3-hour hearing, Chairwoman Eliza Brandt made a historic announcement. We are establishing the Youth Passenger Defense Council, with Mr. Malcolm Howard as senior advisor and 2 honorary appointees, Sasha and Simone Howard, representing the voices of America's youth at all federal airports. The entire chamber stood in applause, a rare sight on Capitol Hill. That night, the hashtag Howard Sisters overtook election headlines and trended #1 across the U.S. Gate B12 was temporarily closed for renovations, but outside, a new plaque was mounted, stainless steel, engraved with the words, We don't run, we rise. Sasha and Simone Howard. Beneath it, a small inscription, dedicated to all who were quietly excluded and chose to rise. 3 months later, JFK International Airport, New York. A massive banner hung in the central waiting area between domestic terminals, printed with an image of 2 young black women in black and white martial arts uniforms. They stood in a defensive stance, strong, composed, unshakable. The words beneath them read, The Rising Initiative, where strength begins in silence. Following their historic congressional hearing, Malcolm Howard and his daughters did something unprecedented. They partnered with the TSA and FAA to launch a passenger self-defense training program for youth at 5 pilot airports: JFK, LAX, O'Hare, Denver, and Houston. They named it the Rising Initiative. Its motto wasn't defend to fight, it was defend so you're not erased from the spaces you belong in. At JFK's Terminal 2, once just a staff conference room, now stood a social impact simulation center. The floors were padded, the walls held images of real-life moments: a girl being repeatedly called the wrong name, a boy of color questioned for standing in the first-class area, a Muslim woman asked to remove her hijab for a random check. Sasha stepped to the center of the class, her eyes scanning the tense group of new students, their expressions a mix of hope and wariness. "I'm not here to teach you how to fight," she began. "I'm here to ask, how many of you have ever wanted to disappear walking through airport security?" Over half raised their hands. Simone stepped forward, her voice lower, more grounded. "This is a space to teach you how not to live inside that feeling, not through fists, but by standing tall in your mind, before you stand tall with your body." The room fell silent. In just 6 weeks, the Rising had drawn over 4,200 participants, from high schoolers to airport staff to flight attendants. The Atlantic published an article calling it a quiet revolution, where self-defense becomes a symbol of the right to exist without permission. Dozens of other airports submitted requests to join the program. One afternoon, as Sasha and Simone were preparing a session at LAX, Malcolm received a call from the Vice President of the United States. "Mr. Howard, we'd like to invite you and your daughters to the White House. Not for an award, but to discuss integrating the Rising into our national education system." Malcolm sat quietly for a moment. "We'll be there," he said, "but on one condition. We're not asking for honors, we're asking to redefine what safety means. Safety isn't just about stopping terrorism, it's about being respected, even when you're silent." At Houston Airport, where it all began, a statue was unveiled. Not of Malcolm, not of Sasha or Simone, but of 2 small shoes set beneath an inscription: "These shoes don't run, they rise." At the unveiling, Sasha stood quietly in front of the sculpture. A little black girl, around 9 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, is that the girl who stood up for us?" Simone turned, smiling. "No, sweetie, we were just the first. You're the one who will write what comes next." 1 year later, Hamilton International Airport, where it all started. Every wall in the terminal had become art, portraits of previously excluded passengers, now paired with bold quotes, no longer forgotten faces, now icons. And today, the first ever International Aviation Inclusion Day, all of it began here. The Secretary General of the United Nations was present. Representatives from 70 countries attended. 3 major airlines officially announced the implementation of the Rising training program for all frontline staff. Sasha and Simone stood at the podium. Behind them played unedited footage of the confrontation at the airport 1 year ago. No filters, no cuts. The auditorium was silent. Simone spoke first. "We were once called names here that I won't repeat. But today we're not standing here because we fought. We're standing here because we refused to disappear." Sasha followed, her voice clear and steady like a declaration. "We're not asking for power. We're asking not to be erased from public space. If you've ever been questioned just for looking like you don't belong here, remember, you are the airport. You are where people depart, return, and rise." The silent march. After the ceremony, thousands formed a line, walking silently through the main hall of Hamilton Airport. No signs, no chants. Each person wore a simple badge: "I belong." The video of the march spread globally, over 100 million views in just 48 hours. 1 year later, the New York Times placed Sasha and Simone Howard on the cover of their special issue, People Who Defined the Decade. The bold headline read, "We didn't throw fists to destroy the system. We moved with grace to rebuild it." A young black boy, around 10 years old, rolled his suitcase through Hamilton's security checkpoint. A security officer leaned down and smiled. "Where'd you learn to stand that straight, kid?" The boy looked ahead, no hesitation. "Dad said if someone asks what I'm doing here, I should say, I'm not here to prove I belong. I'm here because we all have a place to fly." The story of Sasha and Simone wasn't just a confrontation. It became a map, a guide for everyone who's ever been made to feel small in places not meant for them. And their message? Loud and clear. Strength doesn't lie in striking back. It lies in choosing not to leave when the world wants you gone. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere because of your skin color, gender, or background? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe respect should be the standard, not a privilege, share this video. Because sometimes the way you rise is what teaches the world it should never have tried to push you down. Subscribe now. Here, we don't just tell stories, we tell the truth society tries to skip. And don't forget to turn on notifications. The next video might be yours.